Today we will be reading Harold and the Purple Crayon, written and illustrated by Crockett Johnson. Now while I'm reading this book, I want you to concentrate on problem-solving skills, meaning if you came to a problem, what would you do to fix it? And I also want you to use your imagination. One evening, after thinking it over for some time, Harold decided to go for a walk in the moonlight. There wasn't any moon, and Harold needed a moon for the walk in the moonlight. And he needed something to walk on. He made a long, straight path so he wouldn't get lost, and he set off on his walk, taking his big purple crayon with him. But he didn't seem to be getting anywhere on the long, straight path. So he left the path for a shortcut across a field, and the moon went with him. The shortcut led right to where Harold thought the forest ought to be. He didn't want to get lost in the woods, so he made a very small forest with just one tree in it. It turned out to be an apple tree. The apples would be very tasty, Harold thought, when they got red. So he put a frightening dragon under the tree to guard the apples. It was terribly frightening dragon. It even frightened Harold. He backed away. His hand holding the purple crayon shook. Suddenly, he realized what was happening. But by then, Harold was over his head in an ocean. He came up thinking fast. And in no time, he was climbing aboard a trim little boat. So Harold accidentally created an ocean and he was drowning, but he used his problem-solving skills and he created a boat to save him. He quickly set sail. The moon sailed along with him. After he sailed long enough, Harold made land without much trouble. He stepped ashore on the beach, wondering where he was. The sandy beach reminded Harold of picnics. He thought of picnics made him hungry, so he laid out a nice simple picnic for lunch. There was nothing but pie, but there were all 9 kinds of pie that Harold liked best. When Harold finished his picnic, there was quite a lot left. He hated to see so much delicious pie go to waste, so I wonder what Harold will do. So Harold left a very hungry moose and a deserving porcupine to finish it up. And then he went off looking for a hill to climb to see where he was. Harold knew that the higher up he went, the farther he could see, so he decided to make a hill into a mountain. If he went high enough, he thought he could see his window of his bedroom. He was tired and he felt like he ought to be getting to bed. He hoped he could see his bedroom window from the top of the mountain. But as he looked down over the side, he slipped. And there wasn't any other side of the mountain. He was falling in thin air. I wonder what he's going to do. But luckily, he kept his wits and his purple crayon. He made a balloon and he grabbed onto it. And he made a basket under the big balloon and enough to stand in. He had a fine view from the balloon, but he couldn't see his window. He couldn't even see his house. So he made a house with a window, and he landed the balloon on the grass in the front yard. None of the windows was his windows. He tried to think where his window ought to be. He made some more windows. He made a big building full of windows. He made lots of buildings full of windows. He made a whole city full of windows. But none of the windows was his windows. He couldn't think of where it might be. So he decided to ask a policeman. The policeman pointed the way Harold was going anyway. But Harold thanked him. And he walked along with the moon, wishing that he was in his room, in his bed. Then suddenly, Harold remembered. He remembered where his bedroom window was, when there was a moon. And it was always right around the moon. And then Harold made his bed. He got in it and he drew up the covers. The purple crayon dropped to the floor and Harold dropped off to sleep. The end. So with this book, I would target 1st or 2nd grade. I would ask my students questions to ensure they comprehended the book, such as what did Harold use or create to start off his journey? So my students would be able to tell me that he drew a moon and then he followed the moon, creating a path with his purple crayon. And I would also ask my students what Harold drew to get to his room. How did he end up at home? To ensure that my students understood the story and that Harold came to a problem, but then he used his imagination and he used his problem-solving skills to ensure that he had a solution to his problem. One activity I would use for this book with my students, I would ask them what they would do if they had a purple crayon and where they would go. I would have them write and draw about their story. My students would explore a world of imagination by connecting text to self, using their writing and drawing skills to create their own story. Thank you.